Are you living life after 70 or just surviving it? Be honest, how often do you catch yourself thinking, it's too late for me, or this is just how life is now? Well, let me tell you something that might surprise you. Those thoughts are a lie. Let's challenge everything you think you know about aging. Society has conditioned us to believe that after 70, life becomes a slow descent into irrelevance. Take it easy, don't overdo it, they say. But here's the truth no one talks about. Aging isn't a time to fade away, it's the perfect moment to step into your power. The golden years aren't about slowing down, they're about shedding the nonsense that held you back for decades. And here's the plot twist that might make you uncomfortable. The biggest reason most people feel unfulfilled in their later years isn't because of age or health, it's because they refuse to let go of what's holding them back. Relationships, habits, mindsets, you name it. It's not time doing the damage, it's you. Sound harsh? Maybe. But if you're ready to hear some hard truths that can transform the next chapter of your life, stay with me. You might just find that your best years are still ahead. When I turned 70, I had a moment of reckoning. I woke up one day and asked myself, is this all there is? My days were full, but my heart felt empty. I'd been so busy trying to be the perfect parent, the ideal spouse, the dependable friend, but in the process I'd lost sight of myself. One day, while sitting alone in my quiet living room, I realized something shocking. I didn't even recognize the person I had become. I was living on autopilot, tied to routines and expectations that no longer served me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about aging. This was about how much unnecessary weight I'd been carrying for decades. The wake-up call came when I read a quote that said, "You don't have to carry everything you pick up." It struck me like lightning. How many of us have been holding on to old roles, outdated beliefs, and toxic relationships simply because we're afraid to let them go? The truth is, the only way forward is to release what no longer serves you. So, I made a decision that day. I was going to let go of the baggage piece by piece and start living with intention. And let me tell you, it was the most liberating decision of my life. The first thing I let go of was the constant need to stay busy. For decades, I equated being busy with being valuable. It didn't matter if I was working long hours, volunteering, or filling every spare moment with chores. I felt like if I wasn't doing something, I was falling behind. But then I stopped and asked myself a question that changed everything. Why am I doing all this? What am I actually working toward? The answer shocked me. I didn't know. I was working out of habit, not purpose. It was as if I was on a hamster wheel, running endlessly but going nowhere. One day, while babysitting my grandchildren, my youngest granddaughter asked me, "Grandma, why are you always so tired?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that in all my busyness, I was missing out on the very moments that made life meaningful. Moments like sitting with her, listening to her stories, and just being present. So, I made a conscious decision to stop. I started saying no to commitments that didn't align with my values. I stopped filling my calendar just to feel productive. And you know what happened? I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I finally had the time and energy to focus on the things that truly mattered: my family, my health, and my passions. If you've ever felt trapped in the cycle of busyness, I want to ask you, what would happen if you stopped? Would your world fall apart, or would it finally feel like it's coming together? Another powerful lesson I learned was about money, specifically the trap of mindless spending. For years, I believed that buying things would make me happy. New clothes, gadgets, or a bigger TV, I thought these things would fill the void I felt inside. And for a fleeting moment they did. But the joy never lasted. One day, as I was cleaning out my garage, I looked around at the piles of stuff I had accumulated over the years. Boxes of unused items, gadgets still in their packaging, and clothes I'd forgotten I owned. It was overwhelming. All that clutter was a reflection of my inner world, chaotic, restless, and searching for something more. I realized I'd been spending to feel better, to distract myself from the parts of my life that felt unfulfilled. But instead of bringing joy, all those things just added stress. They didn't make my life richer, they made it heavier. So I decided to quit mindless spending. I started asking myself before every purchase, do I really need this? Will it truly add value to my life? And if the answer was no, I didn't buy it. Instead, I began spending on experiences, Dinners with my family, trips to places I'd always wanted to see, and moments that created memories instead of clutter. If you've ever found yourself buying something you didn't need, ask yourself, what am I really trying to fill? The answer might surprise you. One of the most liberating lessons I learned was letting go of stressing over the small things. For much of my life, I allowed tiny inconveniences to ruin my entire day. A rude driver, a misplaced item, or plans that didn't go the way I wanted. These little frustrations would snowball, stealing my joy and leaving me exhausted. But then I started asking myself a simple question whenever stress bubbled up. Will this matter a year from now? The answer was almost always no. That realization hit me hard. How much time had I wasted worrying about things that didn't even matter in the long run? Life is too short to let traffic jams or spilled coffee dictate your mood. The truth is, we can't control everything, but we can always choose how we respond. I'll never forget one particular moment. I was running late to a family gathering and felt the stress creeping in, heart racing, mind swirling with panic. Then I stopped, took a deep breath, and asked myself, what's the worst that could happen? I realized the people who truly mattered wouldn't care if I arrived 5 minutes late. They cared about me being there, present and calm. So I let go. I laughed at the ridiculousness of my own stress, turned on my favorite song, and drove there peacefully. And guess what? No one even noticed I was late. Have you ever found yourself spiraling over something small? Imagine how much lighter you'd feel if you let it go. Take a moment to ask yourself, will this matter a year from now? If the answer is no, let it slide. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. For most of my life, I believed that putting others first made me a good person. I said yes to every favor, every request, every obligation, even when it left me exhausted and stretched too thin. Sound familiar? But here's the hard truth. Constantly prioritizing others at the expense of yourself isn't selflessness, it's self-neglect. And the worst part? Over time, it breeds resentment. I realized this when I found myself snapping at a loved one for no real reason. It wasn't their fault, I was just completely drained. It wasn't until I turned 70 that I allowed myself to do something I'd never done before, put myself first. It started small. A morning walk, 10 minutes of meditation, or a quiet cup of tea before anyone else woke up. At first, I felt guilty, as if I was being selfish. But the more I practiced, the more I realized something powerful. Taking care of myself made me better for the people I loved. One morning, my daughter said, "Mom, you seem so much happier lately." That moment affirmed what I'd already started to feel. When you're full of energy and peace, you can give so much more to the people around you. If you've been putting everyone else first, let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly took care of yourself? Imagine how much more present, calm, and joyful you could be if you started putting your needs on the priority list. Self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. One of the hardest lessons I learned was how to say no. For years, I was the person who said yes to everything, whether it was attending social events, volunteering for projects, or helping friends and family with endless tasks. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, so I kept piling commitments onto my already overflowing plate. But here's what no one tells you. Saying yes to everything often means saying no to yourself. I'll never forget one weekend when I had 3 commitments back to back. By Sunday evening, I was so drained that I snapped at my husband over something trivial. It wasn't his fault, I was simply exhausted. That was my wake-up call. I realized I was giving away all my time and energy, leaving nothing for myself. So I started practicing the power of saying no. At first, it felt uncomfortable, even scary. But I learned to ask myself 2 questions before committing. Does this align with my values? And will it bring me joy or fulfillment? If the answer was no, I politely declined, and guess what? The world didn't fall apart. One of the most liberating moments came when I turned down an event that didn't excite me. Instead, I spent that evening curled up with a book I'd been wanting to read for months. It felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. If you're struggling to say no, I want you to think about this. What's one thing you've said yes to recently that you wish you hadn't? Imagine how much lighter and freer you'd feel if you gave yourself permission to prioritize your peace. This might be the hardest thing I've had to do, but it's also the most freeing. Letting go of unhealthy relationships is never easy, especially when it's someone you've known for years. But here's the truth. not everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. 4 years, I held on to relationships that drained me. Friends who only called when they needed something, family members who criticized instead of supported, and people who brought negativity into every interaction. I stayed out of obligation, fear of confrontation, and honestly, the fear of being alone. But one day, I asked myself a simple question. How does this person make me feel after we talk or spend time together? If the answer was drained, anxious, or hurt, I knew it was time to reevaluate. One relationship in particular sticks out. A close friend from my younger years had become increasingly critical and dismissive over time. I made excuses for her behavior, but deep down, I knew the friendship was no longer serving me. Eventually, I had an honest conversation, and while it was painful to step away, I felt an immense weight lift. By letting go of toxic connections, I made room for relationships that truly uplifted me, people who encouraged my growth and celebrated my successes. If you're holding on to a relationship that feels more like a burden than a blessing, ask yourself, is this adding joy to my life or taking it away? Letting go isn't easy, but sometimes it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself. You deserve to surround yourself with people who truly value and respect you. For years, I told myself I'd focus on my health later. There was always something more important. Work deadlines, family responsibilities, errands that couldn't wait. But when I turned 70, I had a sobering realization. There is no later if you don't take care of your health now. I'll never forget the moment it hit me. I was playing with my grandkids in the backyard, and after just a few minutes, I was completely out of breath. I sat down, embarrassed and frustrated, wondering how I'd let myself get to this point. That's when I realized I wasn't living, I was just getting by. So I started small. Every morning, I committed to a 15-minute walk. At first, it felt like a chore, but gradually, it became my favorite part of the day. It wasn't just about moving my body, it was about reconnecting with myself, breathing in the fresh air, and feeling alive again. I also made small changes to my diet. Less processed food, more fresh vegetables and water. Nothing extreme, just sustainable steps. One of the biggest shifts came when I added meditation to my routine. I'd always thought meditation was for other people, but those quiet moments of stillness have done wonders for my mental and emotional health. I feel more centered, calmer, and better equipped to handle life's challenges. If you've been putting your health on the back burner, let me ask you this. What's one small thing you can start doing today to feel stronger and healthier? Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. Even the smallest steps can create ripple effects that transform your life. Here's a question for you. How many dreams have you put on hold, telling yourself you'll get to them someday? For most of my life, I believed I had all the time in the world. I told myself, I'll travel when things calm down, or I'll learn that new skill after the kids are grown. But you know what? That someday never came. The wake-up call came on my 70th birthday. I was reflecting on my life, and a thought crept into my mind that shook me. How many of my dreams have I let slip through my fingers because I was waiting for the perfect moment? The truth is, later isn't guaranteed. So I made a promise to myself. No more waiting. No more excuses. I started small, signing up for a painting class I'd always wanted to try. I'll admit I was nervous at first. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in decades, and I worried I'd embarrass myself. But the joy I felt as I lost myself in the colors and creativity, it was worth every moment of uncertainty. Soon I found myself setting bigger goals. I booked a trip to a place I'd always dreamed of visiting, started writing that book I'd been putting off, and began exploring hobbies I'd forgotten I loved. Each step reignited a passion for life I hadn't felt in years. If you've been procrastinating on something that matters to you, ask yourself this. What's stopping you from starting today? The perfect time doesn't exist. The magic happens when you take that first step, no matter how small. Trust me, you'll look back and wonder why you didn't start sooner. I used to fear change. I'd cling to what was familiar, even when I knew it no longer served me. Change felt like losing control, like stepping into an unknown that might make things worse. But here's the irony. By resisting change, I was actually holding myself back. I remember one moment vividly. My doctor had recommended I switch to a healthier diet after some test results came back less than ideal. My first reaction was frustration. I thought, I've been eating this way my whole life, why change now? But then I asked myself, what if this change could make me feel better, stronger, even happier? So I decided to embrace it. I started small, swapping out processed snacks for fresh fruits and vegetables, cutting back on sugar, and trying new recipes that nourished both my body and spirit. Within weeks, I noticed a difference. I had more energy, fewer aches, and most importantly, a renewed sense of control over my health. That experience taught me an important lesson. Change isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. Every change, no matter how small, is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to rediscover parts of yourself you may have forgotten. Let me ask you, is there a change you've been resisting? Maybe it's a new routine, letting go of a bad habit, or even taking a chance on something unfamiliar. What's the worst that could happen if you embraced it? And what's the best that could happen? Change can feel uncomfortable, but it's often the gateway to transformation. Lean into it with curiosity, and you might be surprised by the possibilities waiting on the other side. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly prioritized your sleep? If you're like I was, sleep often feels like the first thing we sacrifice when life gets busy. I used to think, I'll sleep when I'm done, as if rest was optional. But here's what I learned the hard way: your body keeps score. I'll never forget the morning I woke up after only a few hours of sleep. My mind was foggy, my energy was gone, and even the smallest tasks felt overwhelming. It wasn't just one bad night, it was years of treating sleep like an afterthought. What I didn't realize was that by neglecting sleep, I was robbing myself of the energy and clarity I needed to enjoy life. So I decided to make a change. I started creating a simple bedtime routine, turning off screens an hour before bed, sipping a warm cup of herbal tea, and reading a book instead of scrolling on my phone. I also set a consistent bedtime even on weekends. These small changes made a huge difference. I began waking up feeling refreshed and energized, ready to take on the day with a clear mind and a positive outlook. If you're constantly running on empty, ask yourself, what would happen if you prioritized rest? Imagine how much better you'd feel if you gave your body the time it needs to recharge. Sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, especially as we age. Tonight, I challenge you to try winding down a little earlier. Turn off the TV, dim the lights, and give your body the rest it deserves. Trust me, you'll feel the difference in ways you never expected. Here's a question I never thought I'd have to ask myself. Why do we spend so much time comparing our lives to others, even when it makes us miserable? For years, I quietly measured my worth against those around me, friends, family, even strangers. I'd compare their successes, their lifestyles, even their appearances, always wondering, am I enough? The answer I realized was no. Not because I wasn't enough, but because comparison is a game you can never win. There will always be someone with more, someone doing something better, or someone achieving things on a different timeline. It wasn't until my 70s that I finally understood. Comparison is the thief of joy. One moment that stands out happened at a family gathering. I overheard someone talking about a friend's luxury vacation, and for a second, I felt that familiar pang of envy. But then I looked around. My grandchildren were playing, my family was laughing, and I was surrounded by love. That's when it hit me. Why am I focusing on someone else's life when my own is already so rich? From that day forward, I made a promise to myself. No more comparisons. Instead, I began practicing gratitude. Every morning, I wrote down 3 things I was thankful for, big or small. Over time, this simple habit shifted my focus inward and helped me appreciate my journey for what it is. Uniquely mine. Let me ask you, how much of your happiness have you given away by comparing yourself to others? What would happen if you stopped? You might just find, as I did, that the life you have is already enough, and more than enough to bring you peace and joy. Imagine this for a moment, waking up every day feeling lighter, freer, and more at peace with yourself. No more carrying the weight of unnecessary commitments, toxic relationships, or outdated expectations. Instead, your life is filled with purpose, joy, and the freedom to focus on what truly matters. This isn't just a dream, it's entirely possible. I'm living proof. By letting go of what no longer serves you, you create space for the things that do. When I stopped comparing myself to others, I found gratitude. When I said no to overcommitments, I found balance. When I embraced change, I found growth. And when I prioritized myself, my health, my rest, my passions, I discovered a renewed zest for life that I didn't think was possible at this stage. But here's the thing, this transformation didn't happen overnight. It started with small, intentional steps. Each change built on the last, and before I knew it, my life was completely different, in the best way possible. So, let me ask you, what would your life look like if you let go of just one thing holding you back? Would you feel lighter, happier, more in control? The beauty is, you don't need to change everything at once. Start small, take one step, and watch how that momentum can change your life. The best part? It's never too late to begin. The golden years aren't a time to fade away, they're a time to shine brighter than ever before. Now that you've heard these lessons, it's time to take action. Remember, knowing what to do is just the beginning, doing it is what creates real change. So here's my challenge for you. Pick one thing from this video that resonated with you the most. Maybe it's letting go of toxic relationships, saying no to overcommitment, or finally prioritizing your health. Whatever it is, commit to making one small change today. Write it down. Say it out loud. Better yet, share it in the comments below. Declaring your intention is the first step to making it real. And if you've made it this far into the video, I know you're serious about wanting a better, more intentional life. So why not keep this journey going? Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss more videos like this. Together, we can build a community of people redefining what it means to thrive after 70. Finally, if this video inspired you or made you think, give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone you know who could use a little encouragement or a fresh perspective. You never know, this might be exactly what they need to hear today. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your happiness and live with intention. Your best years aren't behind you, they're waiting for you to claim them. So, what's one thing you'll let go of today to make space for a better tomorrow?